Welcome to the Smarter Money Life podcast hosted by Andy Mattingly. Frequent guest on local TV news, regular segment on Indy Now TV, and a leader here at Forum Credit Union. Forum's mission is to help members lead their financial dreams, and in today's podcast, we're going to cover a topic that will help you improve your financial life. Have you heard that building a home is a nightmare? Or have you heard that if you're going to buy an existing home, you need to get up to speed on all those power tools and watch every home improvement show on HGTV? Hi, I'm Andy Mattingly, and what we really want to talk about today is buying versus building. Now, I could give you a lot of details on that, but I thought it would be better if we brought in Forum's expert, resident genius on buying versus building. That's Mike Senn. He's the leader of our mortgage team. He knows a lot about buying and building. He always gives our members some great advice. So, Mike, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
And I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode because we're going to go through a lot of different things. And Mike and I, we don't really have a script for these, so who knows where it's going to end up. So, one of the things I want to first start with, Mike, is the pros and cons for buying versus building. What are some of those just basic things to start with?
Well, I think you first have to ask yourself, what's my timeline? How long do I have to shop for a house? I mean, are we talking 2 months? Are we talking 8 months? That's going to be kind of a driver on which direction you go. But also, where do you want to live? That's going to be really important as you start weighing out, are they even building homes in that area or the existing inventory in that area? So I'd probably start there and then maybe chop my way in.
Yeah, because if part of your plan is that you're going to tear down a house in an area that there's not building, that's probably not a good place to start. That gets pretty expensive fast.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. So if you were going to tell someone that was thinking about building, what's your two things that you say, hey, these are the two reasons that I would build?
Well, I think that when you think of building a new home, you think of peace of mind, right? So like new appliances, new materials, a home warranty, a brand new neighborhood with, awesome amenities. There's a lot of great neighborhoods going up. And I think that that's a huge draw for a lot of buyers today. And then the second thing is just being able to put your touch to it. You're picking out the colors, the layout, the flooring, anything along those lines. So I think that those are probably the two biggest reasons why I would go with a new build.
So when you're talking about buying an existing home, so we're going to kind of compare and contrast during this whole podcast here. So what are two reasons that you would say, hey, this is why you should buy an existing home?
Well, I think first and foremost is you probably have more room for negotiation, and which would equate to getting a better deal, right? So you never really know why a seller is listing their house. It could be that they're looking to, downsize. They're moving out of state. Maybe they're even building a new home and they're waiting to get into that. So I think that a lot of times you have the ability to negotiate, and hopefully you can get a better price in that. Second is, I think just the move-in time frame is a lot faster. A building, you're probably looking at 5 to 7 months. With an existing home, most agents right now are writing contracts for 45 days or less. In most cases, we're seeing purchase agreements close in less than 30 days. So you have a lot more control over when you're planning your movers, your closing date. It's not necessarily a moving target like maybe new construction might be.
Sure. And with negotiation, just in my own personal thing, real quick, the first house I bought, I didn't own a lawnmower, so we asked to have the lawnmower, and they left it because they were moving and they didn't want to move it. So it was great. And then I have a really nice snowblower that I would have never bought myself because when my brother was moving into a house, he asked for the snowblower to stay. He has a tractor to do, and he gave me the snowblower. So negotiation has worked out for me. And when we were moving from one of our houses, the person wanted my wife's desk and something else, and we didn't want to take the desk apart. So we were glad to stay.
Right.
So I think negotiation, sometimes people think it's only on certain things, and there's actually a lot of things you can negotiate there.
Well, and you also get a lot of the extras that are not, over the years, that owner might have put in a fire pit or a fence or done, amazing landscaping or even a pool. So those things might already be there, where that really does kind of change the dynamic of what you're buying. That very well could be your dream home. And so I think sometimes that new or that existing home can just work out to be perfect for you.
Yeah, just last week we drove by the first house we ever owned. Mm-hmm. They still have the fence that I put in and all the trees that we put in that never got over about 15 feet tall or like 30 feet tall and actually doing what I wanted to do when we moved in. So you're right, you do get some benefits there. Yeah. So why do some people decide they don't like the home building process?
I think it's different from everybody, but I would say the vast majority just don't like the home building process, if that makes sense. It's drawn out. It's 5 to 7 months typically. I mean, in some depending on the size of the house, that could be 12 months. It just takes a lot of focus, a lot of energy, and a lot of your time. And I think in many ways, depending if the builder has a lot of projects going, communication can kind of be sparse, and you're involved from start to finish. You're making decisions, you're meeting with the builder, the project manager, you're probably picking out different colors if something was on back order, and so you're going to do weekly site visits. So you are involved in that. And so I think that's probably the thing that people dislike the most. It's just time consuming.
And I've heard you say this before, building a home can be a part-time job.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. Absolutely.
And not everyone has that
Absolutely.
kind of, so I think you have to be prepared for that. One of the other things that I think about that sometimes people get into is that building a home, you can make changes, but changes cost money. Right. And they feel like, I think you have to go into it understanding that the great thing is you can change your mind. It's just going to cost you. But it's going to cost you if you decide in a year that you don't want that. So it's actually cheaper to make that change before it gets done than after it gets done, right?
You're absolutely right. You're going to pay a premium no matter what direction you go. And so, it is, you got to weigh it out.
So how can buying an existing home end up being a homeowner's nightmare?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I would probably say lack of due diligence. I think a good rule of thumb is existing homes typically have existing problems. And the goal is to find that in the front end to make an educated decision if you're going to buy that house. So that's why it's so important to hire, a professional who's a home inspector, go in the house, spend 2-3 hours in the house, and really put a set of eyes on it and come back with a report that can, give you the needed information if you should even move forward on this house. I think that's really important. Even though that home inspections are not guaranteed to catch everything, it's a great step. Another great step is really maybe reaching out to your insurance agent and having them run a claims history report on the property. I've seen a lot of buyers do that, and that's actually kind of been a nice complement to the home inspection as well as the seller disclosure, just to kind of do your own investigative work. At the end of the day, you need to protect yourself, and those type of steps are going to help you make an educated decision.
Now, what are some of the things that happens when someone says, you know what, I really want to get into a fixer-upper because I really think I can add value to this house? What are some of the pitfalls if someone's doing it for the first time that maybe they don't understand and buy an existing home that's a fixer-upper that might become frustrating?
Well, I think you have to plan for the worst. And so if you're, thinking about redoing the kitchen and you're redoing the bathrooms, depending on the age of the home, it might have been really made with quality materials, but it might be 20 years old. Yeah. So you probably know as well as I do, you open up a wall, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into, and especially on homes that are 50, 60 years old. So I think that if you're going to do a project like that, one, you kind of have to have time to do it, but you have to have the reserves to do it and the financial capacity to be able to handle some of the shifts in the costs. I would personally tack on another 15 to 20% on any project that I would do. And so I would just be mindful of that because that's not for everybody. Financially, it's not for everybody. And even just, living in a renovation project is, not a lot of people like to do that.
Yeah, you just never know what the homeowner before you did
Right.
that's not up to code, that's going to cost you lots of money to do,
Right.
or what's behind that wall. As we're talking about buying versus building, and, we haven't talked very much about this, is there any process that's different in getting the mortgage and financing that? What are things that people should know about that might be a little different, in building versus buying?
Well, I think pre-approval is going to be important, right? So coming out of the gate, getting pre-approved with what you want to do, no matter if it's an existing home or it's new construction. So meeting with a mortgage advisor, having them run your credit, knowing your numbers. I think it's so important that you know your numbers well in advance to going and shopping. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that buyers do is that they wait too long and then they get in, they find, a couple houses that are really attractive and then they're backpedaling, right? So it's going to be the same process. We're still going to run income. We're still going to run your credit. We're still going to look at these things and figure out, can you afford to purchase, to build this house and or to buy this house? And then we're going to figure out a strategy based on that. And so it's really very similar. Now, if you're getting into custom construction, that's a different beast. You're dealing with a custom builder. There's a lot more paperwork, plans and specs, versus if you're building with, say, a production builder like, some of the larger ones around central Indiana.
Sure.
So,
sure.
But I think the most important step, no matter what direction people are going, is start the pre-approval process now, even if you're 3 or 4 months out from starting your shopping. then you have a strategy.
And so for typically, we won't get into form-specific products here because we are trying to be neutral about that and just provide information. But typically, if you're building a home, how soon can you lock in your rate? Especially if you're talking about like one of our production builders that's in a neighborhood. You start the process, like, people get nervous about rates. Like, how quickly can you, or how soon before the house is done, can you lock in rates for most typical lenders?
Well, most typical lenders are going to fluctuate, right? A lot of times they'll let you lock, maybe 90 days, 60 days. We actually are fortunate enough to be able to have a product that will allow you to lock when you go under contract to build, and it'll lock up to 12 months. And then it will ride that lock until about 60 days prior to completion, and then we're going to look at the market together and see if we can get you a better rate. If we can, then we're going to put you in that better rate. So that just gives some peace of mind during that building process, especially in a market like this where maybe rates are kind of a little volatile, up and down. It just kind of creates some peace of mind during that 5 to 7 month build. And sometimes there's delays. So that 7 month can turn into 9 months. You just never know. So I think we've got them covered that whole time.
So I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot here. If you're looking to build a home, whether it's in the production build or maybe it's a custom build, what's a couple of things that borrowers should think about before selecting a builder, or make sure that's in the contract, or to be careful of? Because I know you've given a lot of advice to our members over the years about this. So what's the couple of things that you just really need to make sure that are in there that a lot of people kind of forget?
I think people fall in love with the house.
Yes.
And that's okay, right? And that's the fun part of building. But you got to treat this as a business. And so I would do your own due diligence, and I would look online. I would see if you can get a list of references, and I wouldn't just drive by the house. I'd see if you can talk to the buyers of that home. And so I would definitely try to do my own due diligence with builders. Second is I would really want to see their contract. There's no standardized construction contract that all builders use in the state of Indiana. So everyone's using a different contract, and there should be things in there that you need to know. All too often, buyers go through and they glance at the contract, but they just focus on the end number, which they really need to look at the meat and potatoes of the contract so they understand, what about change orders? What about delays? What about cost overruns? And really kind of pick that apart. And then if they're at that point where they are going to sign a contract, I probably would engage my own counsel and have an attorney review that, just because their attorney drew that up. Make sense? And so
right.
I think it's more about just becoming educated in the builder that you're going to select, how they work, the product that they put out, and are you going to feel comfortable working with this builder for the next 5, 7, 12 months. And that's how I would approach a production builder. That's how I'd approach a custom builder, in that same light.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we hope today we've given you some things to think about, whether you want to buy a home or build a home. It's one of the biggest steps that you're going to take. If this is the first time you're doing it, there's always a lot of resources to help you. And I think the bottom line that we want to get across here, it's finding the way that's right for you. Buying or building can be a great experience. It's just, hopefully you now have a little bit more knowledge and understand, what things concern you and what things that, you're like, oh yeah, I can do this. I do want to be involved in the construction process, and I want to be the first person to live in my house and have the touch with it. And even in a production builder, that's a feeling that you can still get. So we hope we've enjoyed this episode. Mike, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And please make sure to ask any questions or put anything in the comments. We're always looking at those. This has been another episode of the Smarter Money Life podcast, powered by Forum Credit Union. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to look for our next episode wherever you get your podcast. Remember, now is a great time to make a difference in your financial life. Until next time.